Hey, this is a review of Jess Franco's Sinner, The Secret Diary of an Nymphomaniac. I'll just call it Diary of an Nymphomaniac for short. We're looking at the French Blu-ray DVD combo from Le Chat qui Fume. This is a very handsome presentation of a fairly low budget and obscure film. So, as usual, my compliments to Le Chat qui Fume for making an effort and going the extra mile to present a rather obscure title in such a splendid release. Diary of a Nymphomaniac was released at the same time with Lorna the Exorcist by Le Chat qui Fume. They had this package like sort of a Jess Franco set of two films, and both films were produced by Robert Denel, who also financed such Jess Franco films as Erotic Rites of Frankenstein or Demons. This film here is not a very happy film. This packaging might be misleading. It might make you think that this is some kind of a dumb sexy comedy or some kind of a sexy adventure romp or just plain erotica. It's none of these things really. In the film there is plenty of topless women and occasionally men. There are some sexual situations, and the story, what little there is, it's a kind of a series of vignettes illustrating this character's eventual downfall, I guess. The film is more about mood and occasional moments of brilliance amongst the general sort of vagueness and confusion, very typical of Jess Franco in that period. Jess was hugely prolific in this stretch in the early, from 69 through to 74, 75, his output was immense. Judging this film is impossible for me at the moment because I came to it quite recently. And I find with Franco, generally, it's hard to make up your mind about a film. Okay, upon the initial viewing, you might have some first impressions, but they tend to mutate over time, and that time isn't months, it's usually years. In my case, it's years. So I'm just going to reserve my judgment for later on this film because it's I've only seen it, let's say, a couple of times so far, and the first impressions is what I can share for the moment. Is aesthetically, this is quite a grubby film. This is sourced from a film print, so the contrasts are harsh, the grain is pronounced, and people who don't like grain, people who don't like filmic appearance should steer clear from this title, and probably from Jess Franco anyway. If you don't know Jess, well, be careful because there are some very rough edges in his films. I've been curious to see this film for a while. I read things about it, I saw some stills. The cast is promising because we got some of the troupe, some of the same actors who were very busy working for Jess in that period, like Anne Libert and obviously Howard Vernon, and the title role is played by Montserrat Bruce, who is very good at portraying innocence in this film. She's supposed to play this young girl who falls victim to sexual abuse from all sorts of characters in this film. That's quite a typical Franco scenario. You can think back to his sad adaptations of Justine, for example. There are some similarities between Diary of a Nymphomaniac and Eugénie de Sade, in that there is this young character, and we have the fairly sloppy and sketchy series of vignettes stitched together by the narration from the female protagonist. So there is that similarity, but those are quite different films, not only because of the setting, because Eugénie de Sade was made partially in Germany, and Diary of a Nymphomaniac is made either in Portugal or Spain. And This film is one of the Franco films where there is that undercurrent which is almost depressing, and it's not a happy film. There are some moments where it shows people hanging out in nightclubs, typical. It shows people sort of in bed together. It shows people laughing, drinking, occasionally smoking a joint. But there is that atmosphere of doom and general misery. Nobody appears to be very happy, or none of the characters are able to break this circle, to get out of their, to get away from the problems apparently in this film. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely not an upbeat or an uplifting viewing. From the visuals here, we have quite blatantly a no-budget approach with just camera on tripod and occasional zooms and quite dodgy pans, where the way the camera pans, it draws your attention to it because you can tell the tripod isn't exactly very smooth or very articulate, so that you get those jerky pans. Obviously, Jess Franco wasn't given the best equipment to work with for this film. So yeah, people who are into technical brilliance, please just go elsewhere. This is Franco, so this is all about forsaking and looking beyond the superficial visual or sound quality. As for sound, Diary of a Nymphomaniac was not supervised by Jess Franco when it came to either editing or dubbing. Apparently he's just consigned some cans of film to the producer, who passed them on to the editor, and Jess has only supplied a few pages of general outline, and that was it. So you can tell at times, I mean, maybe it's because I watched the featurettes, so I'm influenced by the comments, by the editor's comments. But there is the feeling that this film shows more the hand of the editor than of the director, because there is a very indiscriminate approach how it's put together. There are even some loose ends there left in, where I think you can tell the actors are out of character, and those bits are they were still left in the film, which I think, I mean, today watching this sort of thing is like, oh right, today this would have been on the level of a YouTube video, this film, but this was a production. This was screened in 6 cinemas, I guess, not a wide release, but some kind of regional release. So it's a film where the technical quality of the production is so average that it would not have enjoyed any kind of release outside of its time when it came out, because back then any sort of nudity guaranteed a certain amount of admissions to the cinemas, and this is how Jess Franco was able to put out this many films in the era, because he stuck to the market, where he knew he could do whatever he wanted as long as he delivered a certain level of nudity and exploitation content. The story I couldn't really comment on, except that, like I said, I felt echoes of many other Jess Franco films in Sinner. So this was like being in some kind of a cave where every sound comes back to you as an echo. So this was like a hall of mirrors, where I thought of many other Jess Franco films I've seen over the years. At the moment it's not one of my favorites, but things could change. Let's talk a little bit about the presentation. There is a Blu-ray and the DVD. And on the extras front, there are interviews. There is an interview with the film's editor, Gérard Kekoan, who was also a prominent filmmaker in his own right in France, where he produced a number of sex films. And Gérard Kekoan is a very, very affable individual, and he speaks at length. Unfortunately, his interview does not include English subtitles, and this is an incentive for me to learn French, I guess. The main feature, though, it has not only the original French audio option, but also there is the English dub, and there is a choice of subtitles, so you're able to view the film also with the English subtitles activated if you prefer. My one single complaint about this presentation is, as with other more recent releases from Richard Kifumes, where are the chapter stops? you don't have a sense of navigating a film because, like I said, the chapter stops are few and they're not very well positioned. And because the film itself doesn't have a very pronounced structure in terms of, the three-act structure, or it becomes a very good specimen of Jess Franco production from his heyday, when he was consigning a certain amount of footage, which usually included quite long reels of nightclub scenes where people just sit around smoking, having beers or champagne, and watching other people strip or watching other people on the dance floor. There is a great nightclub scene which is used, I think, at least 2 times throughout the film, where you get some very period moves from the people and very, very period outfits. So there is a great sense of this being a time capsule of the early 70s on the continent. So I think this is a great window into a bygone time. There is also an interview with the actress from the film, Jacqueline Laurent, excuse me if I mispronounce her name. She has appeared in 2 Jess Franco films, Lorna the Exorcist and Diary of the Nymphomaniac. And this same featurette also appears on the Le Chat qui fume Blu-ray of Lorna the Exorcist. So they have carried over the same featurette on both discs, and that's fine, but there are no English subs again. It's a lengthy interview where Jacqueline Laurent also speaks about her, how she started out and what she has moved on to from those films with Jess. It's a lengthy interview, but unless you're a French speaker, this can be quite a frustrating one. There is also an excellent video with Alain Petit, who's a Jess Franco associate, who's appeared in a number of Franco films and who's even co-scripted some of those films with Jess Franco. And Alain Petit is extremely well informed, and he's published himself some very valuable magazines and books on cinema and on Jess Franco in particular. Alain Petit often appears on French DVDs and Blu-rays of Jess Franco in the extras section. For example, the French Blu-rays, for example, of Erotic Rites of Frankenstein or Dracula's Daughter, there is usually a featurette with Alain Petit. And here Alain Petit speaks about the producer Robert Denel, who had quite an imposing office, who had quite an epic office in Paris in the Champs-Élysées or somewhere like that, and who was a bit of an old school producer. So there is that very interesting comment on what Robert Denel has contributed to the genre cinema in Europe at the time, but again, it's all in French. On the whole, this is a very beautiful presentation of typical Franco film, where production values are shaky, where the atmosphere is key, where dialogues are irrelevant or lame, where acting is more about achieving just minimal connection with the viewer and maybe aiming at bringing to the screen some comic book attitude in terms of positioning characters within the frame even, and how the characters deal with the extremely comic bookish dialogues they're given. So it's a film which definitely breaks with a lot of the naturalistic tradition of how people should behave in terms of psychology or how they should move within the frame. So I think Jess Franco, as usual, is a filmmaker's filmmaker, and if you're looking for a detour away from the mainstream, if you're looking for a quick holiday from typical films in terms of, 3-act structure and plot progression in terms of ABC and the payoff in the end, and where all the questions are answered in the end, all the loose ends tied up. So Jess Franco could be a great option there. But he's not for everybody because, from today's viewpoint, all of the sex in his films, well, it does look kind of strange again. The way he presents nude bodies and the way he frames supposedly erotic scenes is very peculiar. It makes you think again of art house, the way sometimes the bodies are bisected with the framing and everything. I guess I'm not going to comment on the film quality too much because right now, like I said, I'm still new to this film. I haven't had the time to make up my mind about it. It didn't sparkle an immediate obsession in me. I didn't feel like, oh my god, this is some kind of a lost gem. It's not a huge milestone in Jess Franco's career or in the European genre cinema, but it certainly is commendable the way Le Chat qui Fume presents this film in such a beautifully packaged release. Thanks a lot for watching. I guess I'll be covering more Jess Franco films in the future. So that was me, Alex, with Trash Film Addict, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.